3 years after their lakeside engagement, Emma and David stood in a small chapel in David's hometown of Bend, Oregon, surrounded by family and friends who had watched their quiet love story unfold. Emma wore her grandmother's simple white dress, altered to fit her petite frame, while David looked handsome in a navy suit his father had helped him choose. The wedding was small and intimate, reflecting both their personalities. Instead of a large reception, they held a gathering in the gardens behind David's family farmhouse, where string lights twinkled among the apple trees and Sarah had prepared a feast using vegetables from their organic garden. Emma's maid of honor was Maria, her former roommate who had become her closest friend. David's best man was his older brother Jake, who had flown in from Seattle where he worked as a renewable energy engineer. During the ceremony, as Emma spoke her vows in a voice that was quiet but unwavering, many guests remarked later that they had never heard such sincerity in wedding promises. "David," Emma had said, looking directly into his green eyes, "you taught me that my voice matters, not by telling me to be louder, but by listening when I was quiet. You showed me that love isn't about changing who you are, but about becoming the best version of yourself alongside someone who sees your potential." David's vows brought tears to many eyes. "Emma, you showed me that strength comes in many forms. Your gentle wisdom has guided me through every important decision I've made since we met. You made me understand that building a life together means creating something that brings out the best in both of us." After their honeymoon in the mountains of Colorado, where they spent a week hiking and talking about their dreams for the future, Emma and David settled into married life in Portland. Emma had transferred to Portland State University to complete her master's degree, while David had been promoted to senior consultant at his environmental firm. Their first apartment was tiny, a converted loft above a coffee shop in the Alberta district, but they made it their own. Emma painted the walls in soft colors that promoted calm and creativity, while David designed built-in shelves and storage solutions that maximized their small space. Friends who visited always commented on how perfectly the apartment reflected both of their personalities. Emma discovered that marriage to David felt like a natural extension of their friendship. They fell into comfortable routines. Emma would read psychology journals while David sketched building designs at their small kitchen table, both of them working in companionable silence broken by occasional discussions of what they were learning. 2 years into their marriage, both of them experienced career breakthroughs that would shape their future in unexpected ways. Emma's master's thesis on trauma-informed design in therapeutic spaces caught the attention of her advisor, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, who encouraged her to apply for a doctoral program with a focus on environmental psychology. "Emma, your research on how physical spaces can either trigger or heal trauma responses is groundbreaking," Dr. Martinez told her during a meeting in her office. "You're identifying connections that could revolutionize how we design hospitals, schools, and therapeutic facilities." Around the same time, David's firm was contracted to design a new community mental health center in Southeast Portland. When the project manager learned about Emma's research, she suggested that the firm consult with Emma on the psychological aspects of the design. Working together professionally for the first time, Emma and David discovered they made an extraordinary team. Emma's understanding of how environments affected mental health combined with David's technical expertise in sustainable design resulted in a building proposal that impressed both the clients and the broader architectural community. The mental health center they designed together featured natural lighting systems that reduced anxiety, carefully planned sightlines that helped patients feel safe rather than trapped, and sustainable materials that created a connection to nature even in an urban setting. The building included healing gardens, quiet spaces for reflection, and innovative air circulation systems that promoted both physical health and psychological well-being. When the Mental Health Center won a national award for innovative healthcare design, Emma and David found themselves invited to speak at conferences across the country. Emma, who had once been terrified of speaking in front of groups, discovered that when she was talking about work that mattered to her, her nervousness transformed into passion. Their first major speaking engagement was at a conference on therapeutic architecture in Chicago. Emma was scheduled to present their research on trauma-informed design while David would discuss the technical implementation of their ideas. The night before their presentation, Emma sat on the edge of their hotel bed, hands trembling as she reviewed her notes for the 100th time. "I can't do this, David," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There will be hundreds of people in that auditorium. Architects, psychologists, healthcare administrators. What if I freeze up? What if I forget everything I want to say? David sat beside her and gently took her hands in his. Emma, do you remember what you told me the night before I defended my senior project? You said that when you care deeply about something, your passion speaks louder than your fear. That's different. You've always been comfortable speaking in public. Actually, I wasn't. I was terrified every time until I started talking about things that mattered to me. And this matters to you more than almost anything. You've spent 3 years researching how design can help people heal. You have something important to say. The next morning, as Emma stepped up to the podium and looked out at an audience of several hundred professionals, she felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach. But, as she began to speak about their work, sharing stories of patients who had experienced reduced anxiety in their carefully designed spaces, her nervousness gave way to the deep conviction that this work could change lives. The presentation was a tremendous success. During the question and answer period that followed, Emma fielded complex inquiries about her research with confidence and clarity that surprised even her. Several audience members approached them afterward, interested in collaborating on future projects. That conference marked the beginning of what became known in professional circles as the Chun Rodriguez approach to therapeutic design. Over the following years, Emma completed her PhD while she and David established a consulting practice that specialized in creating healing environments. Their work took them to projects across the country, a children's hospital in Denver where Emma's research on color psychology and spatial relationships helped reduce patient anxiety by 30%, a veterans treatment center in Phoenix that incorporated David's sustainable design principles with Emma's trauma-informed approach to create a space that felt more like a retreat than a medical facility. 5 years after their marriage, Emma and David were featured on the cover of Architectural Digest in an article titled The Quiet Revolution: How Two Young Designers Are Changing Healthcare Architecture. The article highlighted their work but focused particularly on Emma's journey from shy graduate student to internationally recognized expert in therapeutic design. I used to think my voice didn't matter because it was quiet, Emma was quoted as saying. I've learned that some of the most important conversations happen in whispers, and some of the most powerful changes start with gentle persistence rather than loud proclamations. Their personal life flourished alongside their professional success. They bought a small house in Portland's Selwood neighborhood, where Emma created a home office surrounded by plants and filled with natural light, while David converted the garage into a workshop where he could build furniture and small architectural models. They traveled frequently for their work but always made time for the quiet moments that had defined their relationship from the beginning. Saturday morning coffee on their back porch, evening walks along the Willamette River, long conversations over homemade dinners prepared in their small but efficient kitchen. When Emma turned 30, David surprised her with a weekend trip to the university library where they had first met. They sat at the same corner table where Emma had been studying that Tuesday morning 7 years earlier, now as established professionals returning to remember their beginnings. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't offered to help me that day? David asked as they sat surrounded by the familiar sounds of students studying and pages turning. Sometimes, Emma replied. But I think we would have found each other somehow. Some connections are too important to miss. What made you speak up that day? You said later that you almost never approached strangers. Emma considered the question carefully. I think I recognized something in your expression. You looked the way I felt most of the time, like you needed help but weren't sure how to ask for it. Maybe helping you was actually a way of helping myself. Their 10th wedding anniversary was celebrated at the Children's Hospital in Seattle where they were overseeing the completion of their largest project to date. The new pediatric wing incorporated everything they had learned about creating spaces that promoted healing, natural materials, abundant daylight, views of nature, and carefully designed spaces that gave families privacy while still allowing medical staff easy access. The night before the official opening ceremony, Emma and David walked through the empty halls of the new wing, checking final details and marveling at how their shared vision had become reality. You know what I loved most about this? Emma said as they paused in the main playroom, where large windows overlooked a healing garden David had designed specifically for the children and their families. What's that? It's quiet here, but not empty quiet. It's the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, safe. Kids who are scared or in pain will be able to find calm in this space.
David pulled Emma into his arms in the middle of the empty playroom. "Do you remember what you said in your wedding vows about me listening when you were quiet?" Emma nodded. "I want you to know that I'm still listening. Every day.
And I'm still amazed by what I hear." As they stood together in the building that represented the culmination of their shared work, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The quiet whisper that had started their relationship had grown into a lifetime partnership that was changing how healthcare facilities were designed across the country. Their love story had never been about dramatic gestures or grand proclamations. Instead, it was built on daily choices to listen carefully, support consistently, and create something together that was more meaningful than either of them could have achieved alone. The shy girl who had once believed her voice didn't matter had discovered that some of the most important conversations begin with whispers, and some of the strongest promises are made not with loud declarations but with quiet certainty. Emma and David's story proved that love, like their architectural work, was best built with careful attention to small details, sustainable practices, and the understanding that the most lasting structures are those that grow organically from a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose. 25 years later, their firm had designed over 50 healthcare facilities across North America, each one incorporating the principles they had developed together. Their approach had influenced architectural education programs and changed industry standards for therapeutic design. But, for Emma and David, the greatest achievement remained the quiet love they had built together, one careful conversation at a time, proving that sometimes the most powerful promises are those whispered between two people who choose, every day, to listen to each other with complete attention and respond with unwavering support. Their story continued to inspire young architects and psychologists who learned that the most innovative solutions often come not from those who shout the loudest, but from those who listen most carefully to what the world truly needs. The Daily Grind coffee shop buzzed with the typical afternoon energy of students cramming for exams and professors grading papers. Emma arrived 10 minutes early, her palms slightly damp with nervous perspiration as she scanned the cozy interior for an appropriate table. She chose a corner booth near a window, positioning herself so she could see David when he arrived while still having an escape route if her courage failed her. She had changed clothes 3 times that morning, finally settling on a simple blue sweater that Maria had insisted brought out her eyes. The anxiety that had kept her awake most of the night was now mixed with something else she couldn't quite identify, excitement, perhaps, or hope. When David walked through the door at exactly 3 o'clock, Emma felt her heart skip in a way that surprised her. He was wearing dark jeans and a green button-down shirt, and, when he spotted her in the corner, his face broke into the same genuine smile that had made her feel comfortable the day before. "Emma, I was hoping you hadn't changed your mind," he said as he slid into the seat across from her. "Can I get you something? Coffee, tea?" "Just coffee, please." Black, Emma replied, grateful that her voice sounded steadier than she felt. When David returned with their drinks, he seemed as nervous as she was, which oddly made Emma feel more relaxed. He stirred sugar into his coffee with unnecessary concentration before looking up at her. "I have to confess something," he said. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday all night. It's been a long time since I met someone who sees connections between things the way you do." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "What do you mean?" "Well, when you were explaining how physical spaces can affect mental health, you weren't just talking about theories from textbooks. You were connecting ideas in ways that made me think about my own field completely differently." Over the next hour, their conversation ranged from David's engineering projects to Emma's psychology coursework, but somehow it felt less like two people discussing academics and more like old friends catching up. David told her about growing up on his family's organic farm, where his father had taught him that every structure should work with nature rather than against it. "I remember being maybe 8 years old, helping my dad build a new barn," David said, his eyes distant with memory. He could have used all modern materials, made it quick and efficient. Instead, he spent months selecting wood, positioning everything to take advantage of natural air circulation and solar warming. He said buildings should breathe like living things. Emma found herself sharing stories she had never told anyone, about watching her parents work 18-hour days to keep their restaurant afloat, about feeling invisible in her own family, about discovering that psychology offered her a way to understand the human experiences that had always puzzled her. "I think I chose psychology because I wanted to understand why some people seem so confident while others, like me, feel like we're always apologizing for existing," she admitted. "But, you're not apologizing now," David observed gently.
"When you're talking about something you care about, you light up completely." It was true.
Emma realized that for the first time in her adult life, she was having a conversation where she wasn't constantly monitoring her words or worrying about saying something foolish. David listened to her with complete attention, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and experiences. When David walked her back to campus as the sun began to set, Emma felt a strange reluctance for the afternoon to end. They paused outside the psychology building where Emma's evening study group was meeting. "I know this might sound forward," David said, running his hand through his hair in a gesture Emma was beginning to recognize as nervous habit, "but would you maybe want to have dinner this weekend? There's this little Italian place downtown that supposedly has the best homemade pasta in the city." "I'd like that very much," Emma replied, surprising herself again with how easily the words came.
"Saturday night? 7 o'clock?
Emma nodded, and, as David leaned forward to give her a brief, friendly hug goodbye, she caught the scent of his cologne mixed with coffee and something that was distinctly him. The simple contact sent an unexpected warmth through her entire body. That weekend's dinner marked the beginning of what became a weekly tradition. David and Emma discovered they both loved trying new restaurants, and David's adventurous palate encouraged Emma to step outside her usual comfort zone of simple, familiar foods. More importantly, these dinners became a space where both of them could be completely themselves.
Emma learned that David's confidence in social situations masked a deep thoughtfulness about his place in the world. He worried constantly about whether his engineering work would make a meaningful difference, whether his designs would actually help create a more sustainable future or just make him feel better about participating in a system that was fundamentally flawed. David discovered that Emma's quietness came not from lack of opinions but from years of having her thoughts dismissed or overlooked. When given space and encouragement, she had insights about human behavior and social dynamics that often left him marveling at her perceptiveness. Their relationship developed slowly, built on a foundation of genuine friendship and mutual respect. David never pushed Emma to be more social or outgoing than she was comfortable being, and Emma never tried to dampen David's natural enthusiasm for life. Instead, they found ways to complement each other's strengths. When David had to present his senior engineering project to a panel of professors and industry professionals, Emma helped him organize his thoughts and practice his presentation. She suggested ways to connect with his audience emotionally, not just intellectually, drawing on her psychology training to help him communicate his passion for sustainable design. When Emma was struggling with her own senior thesis on the psychological impacts of urban design, David provided technical insights that strengthened her research. He explained how architectural choices affected human behavior in ways Emma had theorized but couldn't fully understand without his engineering perspective. 6 months into their relationship, Emma had dinner with David's parents when they visited the university for his graduation. She was terrified of meeting them, convinced that they would wonder what their accomplished, charismatic son was doing with someone so quiet and unremarkable. Instead, David's mother, Sarah, embraced Emma like a daughter from the moment they met. His father, Robert, engaged Emma in a lengthy discussion about her thesis research, clearly impressed by her insights into how built environments affected human psychology. "David's told us so much about you," Sarah said as they sat on the porch of David's apartment after dinner. "He says you've helped him see his work in completely new ways." "He's helped me too," Emma replied softly. "I've never felt as understood by anyone as I do with David." "That's what real partnership looks like," Robert observed, glancing at his wife with the kind of affection that comes from decades of shared life. "When you bring out the best in each other without trying to change who you fundamentally are." When David graduated that spring with highest honors, Emma was in the front row of the auditorium, beaming with pride as he walked across the stage. When her own graduation came 2 months later, David organized a surprise celebration with her parents and siblings, the first time Emma's family had all been in the same room for a special occasion in years. The summer after graduation brought new challenges. David had accepted a position with an environmental consulting firm in Portland, Oregon, while Emma had been accepted into a master's program in clinical psychology at the state university. They would be separated by over 200 miles for the first time since they had met. The night before David was scheduled to move to Portland,
they sat together on a bench overlooking the lake at the edge of campus. The setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and orange, and Emma felt the weight of impending change settling around them like evening shadows. "I've been thinking," David said quietly, taking Emma's hand in his. "About us, about the future, about what we both want from life."
Emma's heart began to race, though she couldn't tell if it was from excitement or anxiety.
"I know we're young," David continued. "I know we're both just starting our careers, and maybe it's crazy to make big decisions when so much is uncertain." He turned to face her fully, and Emma saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. "But, Emma, this past year with you has been the best year of my life. Not because everything was easy, but because everything was real. You've made me a better person, a better engineer, a better human being. I can't imagine building a future that doesn't include you." David reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring with a single diamond. "I know this is sudden," David said, his voice slightly shaky with emotion.
"And I know long-distance relationships are hard. But, Emma Rodriguez, would you marry me? Would you build a life with me, wherever that life takes us?" For a moment, Emma couldn't speak. She looked at this man who had seen past her shyness to the person she was inside, who had encouraged her to find her voice without ever making her feel ashamed of her quiet nature, who had shown her what it felt like to be truly known and accepted. "Yes," she whispered, and then, louder, "Yes, David. I want to build everything with you." As David slipped the ring onto her finger, Emma realized that the quiet whisper that had started their relationship had grown into something much stronger. She had found her voice, not by becoming someone different, but by finding someone who valued exactly who she already was. The girl who had once believed her thoughts didn't matter was about to begin a partnership that would prove just how powerful quiet voices could be when they found the right person to listen. The morning sun cast long shadows across the university library as Emma Rodriguez carefully arranged her psychology textbooks on the corner table she had claimed as her own. At 22, she was known among her classmates as the quiet one who always sat in the back row, took detailed notes, and rarely spoke unless directly asked. Her dark hair fell like a curtain around her face as she bent over her studies, creating a barrier between herself and the bustling world around her. Emma had learned early in life that silence was safer than speaking up. Growing up as the youngest of 4 children in a household where her older brothers dominated every conversation, she had discovered that her thoughts and opinions often went unheard anyway. Her parents, both hard-working immigrants from Mexico, had built their small restaurant business from nothing, leaving little time for the gentle encouragements a shy child needed to find her voice. The library had become Emma's sanctuary during her final year of college. Here, surrounded by thousands of books filled with other people's words, she felt comfortable in her silence. She was working toward her degree in psychology, drawn to the field by her desire to understand why some people, like her brothers, seemed to command attention effortlessly while others, like herself, remained invisible. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Emma had arrived at the library before 8, claimed her usual table, and settled into her routine of studying before her afternoon classes. She was deep in concentration, reading about cognitive behavioral therapy, when she heard a commotion near the reference desk. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I really need help finding these sources," a voice said with growing frustration. "I've been looking for over an hour, and my paper is due tomorrow." Emma glanced up from her textbook to see a tall young man with sandy brown hair standing at the reference desk, looking frazzled. The librarian behind the counter appeared overwhelmed, juggling phone calls while trying to help a line of students. The young man was holding a crumpled piece of paper and looked like he was fighting back panic. "I'm sorry, but you'll need to wait," the librarian said curtly, gesturing toward the growing line. "I'm the only one working the desk today." Emma watched as the young man's shoulders sagged with defeat. He looked at the paper in his hands, then at the intimidating rows of academic journals that stretched endlessly before him. Something about his expression reminded Emma of her own feelings of helplessness in crowded classrooms where she knew the answers but could never bring herself to raise her hand. Without really thinking about what she was doing, Emma found herself standing up from her table. Her heart began to race as she approached him, but something stronger than her usual anxiety propelled her forward. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't help but, over here. Maybe I could help you find what you're looking for.
The young man turned toward her, and Emma immediately noticed his green eyes, which seemed to hold both surprise and relief. He was wearing a faded university sweatshirt and had the kind of genuine smile that made her feel less nervous than she had expected.
Really? You'd do that? He asked. I'm David, by the way. David Chen. And, honestly, I'm completely lost here.
I need to find sources about sustainable architecture for my engineering paper, but I have no idea where to start looking.
Emma felt a flutter of confidence. This was something she actually knew how to do.
Hours spent in the library had made her familiar with the research databases and cataloging systems that seemed to mystify other students. I'm Emma, she replied, surprised at how steady her voice sounded.
Sustainable architecture, that's actually really interesting. Let me show you the environmental science databases.
For the next 2 hours, Emma guided David through the research process. She showed him how to use the digital catalogs, explained the difference between peer-reviewed and popular sources, and even helped him locate some physical books in the stacks. What surprised her most was how easy it felt to talk to him when they were focused on the research task.
David was studying civil engineering with a focus on environmental sustainability.
As they searched through articles about green building materials and energy-efficient design, Emma discovered that his passion for creating buildings that worked in harmony with nature came from growing up on a small farm in rural Oregon. My parents always taught me that we're borrowers, not owners, of the land, David explained as they sat surrounded by journals and printouts. When I design buildings someday, I want them to give back more than they take.
Emma found herself sharing more than she ever had with a stranger.
She told him about her psychology studies and her interest in understanding how physical environments affected mental health and well-being. Their conversation flowed naturally from academic topics to personal experiences, and Emma was amazed at how comfortable she felt. You know, David said as they gathered up the research materials, I've been struggling in this library for months, and you just made it all make sense in a couple of hours. You have a gift for explaining things clearly.
Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks.
Compliments always made her uncomfortable, but this one felt different. It wasn't empty flattery, David seemed to genuinely appreciate her help. It's nothing special, she said quietly.
I just spend a lot of time here.
It is special, David insisted. You took time out of your own studies to help a complete stranger.
That says a lot about who you are. As they walked toward the library exit together, David hesitated before saying, I know this might be presumptuous, but would you maybe want to get coffee sometime?
I'd love to continue our conversation about how psychology and architecture intersect.
It sounds fascinating. Emma's first instinct was to decline politely and retreat to the safety of her solitary routine.
But something about David's earnest expression and the genuine interest he had shown in her thoughts made her pause. I'd like that, she heard herself saying.
Great. How about tomorrow afternoon?
There's a little coffee shop called the Daily Grind just off campus.
Do you know it?
Emma nodded, though her stomach was already churning with anxiety about the prospect of a real conversation with someone she barely knew.
Perfect. How about 3 o'clock? As they exchanged phone numbers, Emma couldn't believe what she had just agreed to.
She had never met anyone for coffee before, never had what could even remotely be called a date. But something about David made her want to step outside her carefully constructed comfort zone. That evening, as Emma sat in her small apartment reviewing her notes from the day, she found herself thinking more about David than about her upcoming psychology exam. She replayed their conversation, remembering how he had listened intently when she spoke and how his face had lit up when she explained concepts that interested him. Her roommate, Maria, noticed the change in Emma's demeanor immediately. You seem different tonight, Maria observed as she settled onto their second-hand couch with a bowl of cereal.
Did something happen today?
Emma had lived with Maria for 2 years, but their conversations rarely went beyond discussions of rent and household chores. Maria was outgoing and social, everything Emma was not, and they had developed a polite but distant relationship. I helped someone at the library, Emma said carefully.
And we're getting coffee tomorrow.
Maria nearly choked on her cereal.
Emma Rodriguez is going on a date? This is huge. Tell me everything.
It's not a date, Emma protested, though even as she said it, she wondered if it might actually be one.
We're just continuing a conversation.
But, as she lay in bed that night, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted in her carefully ordered world. For the first time in her life, she had spoken up to help someone, and it had led to something unexpected and potentially wonderful. The quiet whisper of her voice offering help to a stranger had opened a door she hadn't even known existed. As sleep finally came, Emma found herself looking forward to tomorrow with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation she had never experienced before. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness would set in motion a series of events that would transform not only her own life but also touch the lives of countless others in ways she could never have imagined. The shy girl who had always believed her voice didn't matter was about to discover that sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes.
Tomorrow would be the beginning of everything.